Okay, thanks for coming, everybody, to the next SOMC webinar. We're so excited for our guest today, Rory Farrell from NEXXUS. Rory, if you want to just tell us about yourself and about NEXXUS.
Yeah. First, Katie, thank you so much to you and the SOMC team for setting this up. It's been a pretty humbling path since being a young entrepreneur and a lot of the challenges, but then also a lot of the overwhelming support from friends. So I'm Rory Farrell. I am the founder and owner of NEXXUS Consulting LLC. I'm an active duty recon IDC, currently stationed on the West Coast, transferring to Okinawa very soon. So NEXXUS was created as a result of a very close friend of mine who was getting out of the military, who happened to be a force recon gunnery sergeant, Helmand Province, Fallujah. In passing, he mentioned a lot of the challenges he was having submitting his VA claim, and the projected disability ratings he was going to get were really low, in my opinion. As a result of that, I went home and I started to think about what I could do to help him. And as I worked through that solution, I realized that I could potentially help tens of thousands of people with this same problem. Ultimately, that path led me to take out a significant out of my retirement with the permission of my wife, and to create branding and a website that would increase my sphere of influence. Bottom line up front, what NEXXUS offers is consulting for active duty service members who have less than 24 months left in service on how to create a substantial VA claim and submit it prior to separation. The VA has created a program that's not widely talked about. It's touched on briefly in most transition classes, but they have a phenomenal program called Benefits Delivered at Discharge. That allows an active duty service member to submit a claim up to 6 months before separating. So they have between 6 months and 3 months to submit that claim. The program in itself is great. However, it doesn't help build the claim, right? And for people in combat arms, or anybody that's been in for a decent amount of time, has probably put getting injuries and illnesses documented as a second or third tier priority. The military is a funny way of kind of programming you to put the mission first. And as a result of that, a lot of injuries and illnesses go completely undocumented. And what you'll find if you peruse any veteran forum is that the biggest issue veterans have when submitting a claim or trying to appeal a claim is the fact that they do not have service connection documentation or a NEXXUS. And so what I do is offer insight based off of the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 38. And for those that don't know what that is essentially the governing document that the VA uses to determine rating and severity of an injury. So there's no guesswork in what I suggest or recommend people to do. And it's always with a caveat, if this applies. I never tell somebody to say this. It's always, if this applies to you, this is how you should say it, because this is how the VA is going to recognize it as being service connected. And so that process is time consuming, as you would imagine. And that's why I recommend if you have 24 months or less, you start to really think about what that path is going to look like. Unfortunately, most people don't start thinking about a VA claim until they're like a month from separating, or worst case scenario, they've already separated. There are solutions and policies in place that can help those people, but they don't know what they don't know. And so what I do is I break this process down to 3 easy steps. There are 3 components to the VA claim that I recommend submitting that makes your claim airtight. And it's a don't want to say it's a proprietary approach to it, but it is something that I have found that has worked exceptionally well for all of my clients. And it creates a claim that the VA cannot refute. In addition to unmasking a lot of the gray area in the VA claims process, I also kind of go over what's going to happen on the back end with the VA, how they interpret documentation, what they may do with documentation that they're skeptical of, and then also what the adjudication process of the claim looks like. It's far less complicated than the VA makes it seem. And anybody who has spent 5 minutes on the va.gov website knows how overwhelming this process can be. And if I'm given 30 to 45 minutes one-on-one, I am absolutely confident that that individual is going to feel very confident about moving forward and submitting a claim that they're confident they'll receive a substantial disability rating for. With that, I will entertain any questions you might have, Katie.
Thanks, Rory. Yeah, so I did want to ask you, when I myself was separating after 10, just under 10 years of service, I was told I did BDD and I went through a VSO, and I was told that, you know, by my chain of command and, you know, just people, that I should not use a company that is going to charge me any money to submit my claim, because it doesn't cost money. I could go to a VSO and it would be free, and that I should not, you know, that it was schemy, you know. So, you know, what do you say? Because if that's the stigma, how do we get people around like coming to you? But that's what they're being told by the chain of command.
Absolutely. It's a great question. And to be very clear, VSOs are not free. They're state funded typically. You know, a lot of them are volunteer basis. However, the VSO organization is state funded, and that costs a lot of money. I will not disparage VSOs because I believe that their intent is in the right place. However, VSOs vary in quality based on where you go. Since having started this company, I've had countless number of friends that have already transitioned get out and talk about a lot of the unfavorable encounters they've had with VSOs. Namely, I'll give you one example. One guy, Corman, never deployed, did 6 years, had anxiety and depression that was diagnosed in the military, was all service connected. The VSO said, "Hey, did you deploy?" And he said, "No, I haven't." And he said, "Well, then why the F are you claiming this?" That's one example. It's obviously on one end of the spectrum. But I'll answer that question shortly. That's unfortunately a pretty common result. Also, VSOs have to retain clients in order to continue to be an organization. They do not have an investment in how much of a rating you receive, only that your claim is submitted. So to answer that question really quick that he just asked, a VSO is a veteran service officer. They were originally created as a result of the low number of Vietnam veterans and Gulf War veterans that were not receiving benefits. And as you would imagine, those veterans are not technically savvy. So when a lot of this moved online and with a lot of the paperwork, they needed someone to help them. And that's where the veteran service organizations were created. You'll probably know them as DAV. There's a couple other ones out there, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But so VSOs, they vary in quality. That's all I'll say to that. They're not free, they're state funded. Additionally, I would be incredibly apprehensive about using a clinic or anybody that's willing to supply a NEXXUS letter. I've seen clinics and individuals offer to write NEXXUS letters for $500, which is outrageous. I've heard of clinics just in the Southern California area say that for every 10% we raise your disability rating, we get $1,000. Legally, and this is the catch-all, legally, the VA law states that any clinic, attorney, or individual can charge you up to 33% of your total disability rating. Obviously, what my consulting costs is a fraction of what you'd get in a month. So I'm not trying to become wealthy off of this. I'm simply trying to provide information. Unfortunately, the platform that I use costs money. And that's essentially what I'm doing. I am charging to keep the program operational. And I'm sure that would lead to questions of why I'm an LLC versus a nonprofit, which I'd be happy to answer later on. But the truth is, people should be skeptical of anybody that is going to charge them for assistance with a VA claim. I would challenge anybody to call me and do a pre-consultation and ask me those questions. And if I don't sell you on it, go to a VSO or submit it on your own. Another disadvantage to going to a VSO is that they will wait for you to be a veteran. More often than not, they're going to wait for you to cross that line as active duty into the veteran status, and they'll submit the claim on your behalf. You'll sign a power of attorney over to them. They'll review your medical record, and then they'll submit your claim. However, that does not take into account the things you don't have documented. And then once you become a veteran, it's a lot harder to substantiate something as being service connected than it is while you're on active duty. So yeah, that's that. I think skepticism is absolutely the right thing to do, especially with something as important as a VA claim. My services are the only ones that exist while you're on active duty. This product does not exist. I've done hundreds of hours of market research. Everybody that services VA claims is after you are a veteran. And you're already behind the curve once you're in the veteran status. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you. And there's another question in the chat. I don't know if you can see it or if you want me to read it.
Yep, I'm gonna pull it up right now. Okay, I have a question. As a physician supporting active duty members, is there anything I can do to help guys leaving active duty? Sometimes I get approached to help active duty less than 2 months out. This is a great question. Thank you, Dr. Gray, for the question. There is absolutely something you can do. There's numerous things, but I would say if you're in charge of a clinic, so I'm a physician extender, so I'm a credentialed provider in the Navy. Certainly not at the level that a doctor is at. However, I would say we have an advantage of kind of being on the ground level with a lot of these guys. I'd say the single most important thing that a physician can do at any active duty unit would be to require members transitioning to get a final physical done at the 6-month mark, and then making sure that final physical, that 2807, has every single thing possible that they could put on there. That may seem overwhelming, but I believe that that's the easiest way for a physician to be able to condense all of these patient interactions down to one patient contact and capture a lot of that. Because once a doctor signs that final physical, the 2808 and 2807, that's a legally binding document, and the VA cannot refute that. They would end up having to deposition a doctor and do a lot of things in order to say that this document isn't accurate. Also, that gives an active duty service member footing to claim these things later on. And unfortunately, military medicine, I can only speak to Navy medicine, but Navy medicine, and I've been told this by my doctors, the doctors at the unit level, they exist for one purpose, and that is to keep men and women in the fight. So they don't really care if you have a minor musculoskeletal injury. And unfortunately, with all the other demands and collaterals that a physician has at a unit, oftentimes the minor injuries, the musculoskeletal things, concussions, minor TBIs, they get overlooked because they're not life, limb, or eyesight, and they're not really affecting the mission. And as a result of that, a second order effect of that is you have a lot of medics doing like barracks medicine, where they're providing a solution, whether it's anti-inflammatories or maybe even like physical therapy to these guys in a barracks, but it's not getting documented. So it never reflects in their actual record. And that creates a significant issue when they come to claim that in the VA claim. Great question, Russ. Please ask more. Katie, what else do you have? What other questions can I answer for you?
So what exactly is the process? A member's going to be getting out in 12 months and they contact you, and what does that look like?
Great. So Zero NEXXUS offers a bunch of different packages. There's a single consultation that's $150. It says 30 minutes, but I can't condense this down to less than an hour. So it's usually about an hour and 15 minutes. That particular package, that price point exists for the E4 and below, who really, they may not have a ton of money to spend on this, but I need them to have something that's accessible and to get the information to them. TRS and the transition programs that exist do not cover this thoroughly enough. More importantly, it's not one-on-one and it's not personalized to that individual. So if somebody at 12 months comes to me, they have a couple different options. They can either do a single consultation if they're more of like a do it themselves kind of person. I give them all the information. I give them a couple different VA forms that are applications to programs. And then most importantly, I give them their consultation notes. Excuse me. Those consultation notes give them deadlines and taskers as to what they need to do based on their occupational history. We do not discuss HIPAA related items as it pertains to the member. However, based on occupational demand, like if a kid from the 82nd Airborne came to me and is like, I was in the 82nd for 4 years, I can deduce what type of musculoskeletal injuries that person's probably going to have. And then, I'll always speak in what ifs. So I'm like, if you do have a mental health condition, here's the best way to move forward with that while you're on active duty. So those consultation notes are personalized to that individual based on their occupation and what they may be at a higher risk for in terms of having an injury or illness while on active duty. I give them explicit guidance on the final physicals. And then in addition to that, I talk at length about vocational rehab and employability, GI Bill benefits, health insurance post-EAS, life insurance post-EAS, and in a couple like investment tips, but all I'm trying to do is plant seeds. And what ends up happening, I assimilate it to something like this. You find out you join the Navy, same job as somebody else, but you found out that they're getting like a $50,000 bonus. And you're like, what? Why didn't I know about that? And that's what ends up happening when these people take out loans, student loans for $50,000 or $100,000 for master's programs when vocational rehab was there for the taking and they qualified for it. They just didn't know, nor did they submit a VA claim. So I'm creating solutions to problems they don't yet know they have, especially when it comes to healthcare and life insurance post-EAS. It's just real world problems. And the VA has, or I'm sorry, the military has a great way of insulating you from all of those problems. It's like a warm blanket. And the moment you say, hey, you know what? I want to do something else with my life. They're like, okay, roger that. And then they kind of just leave you outside cold. And so that's where that neglect is. That was my opportunity to come in and be like, hey, we have solutions for you. Just put yourself in this position. You're a 6-year Marine veteran. You decide like, hey, you know what? The Marines is not for me. You have 12 months left. You have to find employment to support your family. You have to figure out how to co-locate. You have to figure out if you qualify for the GI Bill. And honestly, the VA claims process is not even top 10 priorities, And if I can take that stress off of them and be like, hey, this is a really easy process for pennies on the dollar. I'm gonna walk you through this entire process. And then they can go on terminal leave after they've submitted their VA claim, expecting to get tax-free compensation monthly very shortly after the EAS. That's kind of what they get. They're going to get that confidence. But in terms of packages, because I've kind of gone away from that, packages exist. $150 gets a single consultation. $250 gets them 2. $500 gets them 3 consultations and kind of like an on-call status. And then I haven't released this one yet, but $999 is going to get them 3 months on-demand consultancy, 12 hours or less turnaround, phone call, text, email. That is, believe it or not, I've actually gotten more offers for people wanting to pay me. They're like, hey, for $1,000, will you do this for me? Some people are like, hey, submit my claim for me. And I'm like, absolutely cannot do that. However, this is what I can do. So for every price point, I believe there's an appropriate solution. I have a lot of command level clients right now, like triad, like CO, XO, Sergeant Major, CMC level, and they are so happy. They're just like, I spoke to a CO of a 1,600 man unit, and he was like, I am just so glad that somebody is out there doing this for these guys. Do you want me to elaborate on that, Katie, before we answer more questions?
Whatever you want to do. Do you want to keep going and then hit the question?
I think that kind of hits it. I can honestly I could go forever in one direction, so I'd prefer to answer some questions. Great question. Awesome question. You still there, Katie?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Okay, that was from Russ?
No, this is from SOMC.
Okay, so that's a great question. I get it pretty frequently. Just take a sip of water. So there is not, and I'll tell you this for 2 reasons. Nobody, not the VA, not a doctor, not a lawyer, can tell you when is appropriate to get something documented. It is most advantageous to either knock the dust off of an old injury and get it documented again, or to get that injury documented closer to that end of service date, because the VA is going to rate you on how severe it is now. If you were in an ID blast, you lost your lower leg, and over the course of 12 years, you've adapted really well. You've got a prosthetic. You don't really have any, limb pain. They're going to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, you lost your leg. We'll give you 10%. But beyond that, you appear to be doing well, seeing as how you've not gone in. More to the point, what I recommend service members say, I'm guilty of it myself. I'll use my example. I had a foot injury, didn't really know how bad it was, but I had a gut feeling that this would disqualify me from deployment. So I gutted through deployment, and come to find out 14 months later, I had dead bone and ruptured tendons in my foot. And the podiatrist was like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, I wanted to deploy, man, like mission first. That's that, that warrior mindset, that like indoctrination. So using that example, what I have told or recommended members to say that's worked in great success is that, and I quote, I did not want to disqualify myself from this training or this deployment due to this injury, and that is why I did not get it documented. Again, nobody can dispute that. Nobody can say, well, it wasn't that bad, so you didn't get it documented. That's not how it works. Additionally, in 2008, the VA determined, there was I think it was Wilkes versus Bookie, or they determined that pain unassociated from a diagnosis is a rateable condition. Meaning, if you have knee pain and radiology says that everything is normal, MRI is normal, physical exam normal, nobody can dispute that you have pain just because there is not some physical exam finding that states it's related to a diagnosis. Does that make sense? So pain itself is a diagnosable condition or a rateable condition. And nobody can say, hey, you didn't get this documented, when it happened. Too bad. I had another one. We were jumping at Sockham, came down. I hit the ground so hard. I thought I broke my legs, and turns out I didn't break my legs, but my Kevlar was twisted to the side. And I ended up having like a concussion. And I, several months later, I realized that I dislocated C7 and T1. I didn't go in right away because I'm going to get dropped or rolled from Sockham, which happened anyway, but unrelated to the injury. But point being, there is no timeline in which you can get it documented. It will become a problem if that service member transitions to a veteran status and then tries to claim it. It becomes a little bit more tricky. However, there are still solutions. This is kind of a tangent off of that, but it's important to note. The VA technically has to acknowledge any condition that develops within 12 months of transitioning from service is service connected. The burden of proof falls on you or on the service member. However, if you develop severe knee pain or arthritis or something after transitioning and it's within 12 months, you can claim that in a VA claim. You'll just need to provide proof.
Okay, I have another question for you.
Yeah, of course.
So, like we were talking earlier about the VSO, which is just what I'm familiar with. They would review your service record and go through items that they thought would be a good fit for you to put on your VA claim, and then they talk to you about it. Is this something that you do, or do you review the service record, or do you just, ask the member, member?
I'm very fortunate to have served as long as I have. I've worked with Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and I don't need to review it. Somebody could be like, hey, I was in tracks for 12 years, and these were the schools that I went to. I can deduce what they're most likely to rate. What I do not do, and what I've heard of VSOs doing, is like, hey, have you ever had like diarrhea? Okay, put IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. That to me is a stretch, and that to me is fraudulent. If you're exposed to gunfire, if you're exposed to loud vehicles, you should probably put tinnitus, hearing loss. I would suggest investigating that. When it comes to evaluating service records, I do not. But what I do recommend, without getting into too much detail about it, is submitting a significant amount of non-medical documentation. So kind of giving some insight to my process, there's 3 things that have worked really well for my clients. Medical documentation while on active duty, very a tactful approach to it. You can't just go in and be like, hey, document these 6 things. There's a very particular way you have to address these things. So medical documentation, non-medical documentation, and then supporting statements from anybody that can corroborate an injury or illness affects you. Those 3 components, with a little bit more guidance, has yielded a very, very good turnaround rating for service members. So to answer your question, yes, I do absolutely do that. Just not at the length that they do that. It's the process is really condensed. So this is over the course of 45 to 60 minutes, where it's happening really fast, and I'm basically taking notes as we go. And then I basically transcribe those notes into what I think is going to work best for this person. It's just while they're on active duty. The reason this is so important to get done on active duty is the access to care. And what I mean by access to care, everybody on here is probably medical, but for those that don't, access to care is simply, if you have an injury or illness, what is the path you have to take to get that documented, and what's the fastest way to get treatments. On active duty, you can walk into your clinic and say, I twisted my knee on this ruck run. You will get a physical exam done, most likely have x-rays ordered, most likely have an anti-inflammatory ordered, and most likely be referred to physical therapy of some sort. That process on the veteran side of things, you're talking 3 months to get all of that done, if not more. Now, that 3 months isn't, you're not unemployed sitting on the couch waiting for VA appointments. You're probably in college, or you probably have a full-time job. If you have kids, it's another part of the equation. So you have to take time off of work, time off of school, find a babysitter, or take those kids to those appointments, as opposed to getting it done on active duty, which is what I suggest, and having that very fast, that amazing access to care. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Let's see this question. Question 1. What do you mean by proof for the injury claim 12 months after transition? Is it radiology exams? So Russ, that is going to be all the above. It can be one, or it can be all of those things. It can be a physical exam. It could be a buddy statement from somebody that was there on a ruck run, that witnessed it. Proof simply means that this occurred on active duty. We're just trying to prove it occurred in service. X-rays, physical exams, final physical, that's like gold standard. If you can't get that, a buddy statement corroborating that would work pretty well also. You're welcome, my pleasure. Also, a big thing that's not really talked about is Cmp exams. And that's something else I speak to as well during the consultation. So if somebody comes in and, they've been seen towards the end of their service for a shoulder injury that wasn't really well documented while they were active duty, the VA may want to do what's called a Cmp exam, which is called a compensation and pension exam. Typically, they'll do these for anything they have questions about. That is going to give the doctor, or that the doctor is going to do a physical exam, which is going to give the VA objective physical exam findings. And then the doctor doesn't determine the rating or severity. He's basically going to report that. It's going to go into your claim, and then it's going to be adjudicated by somebody else. The Cmp exams are tricky. As an active duty member who submitted a claim and you're waiting for the results of your first claim, if you don't speak to most of, if not all of the things you've claimed, they may not rate you for them. So if you complain of back pain and the doctor is just asking you about shoulder pain, and he says, hey, is anything else bothering you today? And you don't speak about your back or some other injury, they're going to determine it resolved, or they may potentially reduce your rating. And what you'll find, if you have any veteran friends, is that they get a letter in the mail saying, hey, we're thinking about reducing your disability rating because you haven't gone to the VA, or your last physical you didn't complain about PTSD. So it's a tricky thing to navigate your way through. The VA, every single thing the VA has in place is designed to lower your rating. That's really important to note. Also, if you're on any mood stabilizing drugs, if you're being treated for PTSD or depression or anxiety, and you don't routinely go in, they're going to assume that the medications have fixed, whatever the issue is, you're stable, and they're going to significantly reduce your rating. Same with, apply that to musculoskeletal injuries. So if you go in, you have back pain and you haven't been seen for back pain in a year and a half, 2 years, they are most likely going to make an effort to reduce that rating. Now you can be what's called permanent and totally disabled, which is completely different. And most of us, most people won't fall into that category, but permanent and total is basically where you are permanent and totally disabled. You cannot seek employment elsewhere. And the VA is going to send you a monthly compensation to compensate for your unemployability. Do we have another question? Is there anything combat related first line of duty? Yes, there is. So you won't get compensated. So if you go in and say, hey, I was golfing and I dislocated my shoulder. They have to treat you for that. The active duty has to treat you for that. However, the VA does not have to give you a rating for that since it did not occur in the line of duty. However, if your occupation continues to make that worse, so for instance, if you're in an infantry and you're constantly loading and unloading rucks and putting more demand on that dislocated shoulder, you can claim that. Similarly, if you were injured prior to service, if you dislocated your shoulder playing football prior to service, and the VA took you in knowing that, or I'm sorry, the military took you in knowing that, they're not going to compensate you for under the diagnosis code of a dislocated shoulder. However, if your occupation made that existing injury worse, they will compensate you for that wear and tear, essentially. Hopefully that answered that. Kind of talk, Dr. Gray, you are SOMC. Who is SOMC? Is that
our
okay.
other SOMC member?
Okay, so that's a great question, but the word accident kind of triggered another thought process. Not really related, but it's good information because everybody on this is probably a force multiplier and they can share this information. Just me in the last 4 years, I have gotten service members probably $175,000 in TSGLI benefits. For those that don't know what TSGLI is, it's the traumatic clause written into our life insurance. So every service member has the SGLI. There's a traumatic clause in that. The example I'll use is, and this is really important for the physician. So Dr. Gray, we had a reconnaissance Marine jumping. He was doing a towards jump, which is essentially where they jump 500-pound barrels from 10,000 to 15,000 feet. Well, his chute deployed more quickly than anticipated. That snap opening snapped and he broke both tibial plateaus on the barrel at 10,000 feet. So he's got spaghetti noodle legs as he's coming down, and he's a superhero, lands on the X, does everything. However, he's got bilateral broken legs. I did not personally know this guy. I had just heard about it from another unit. So I find this guy's contact information, introduce myself, and I'm like, hey, you don't know me, but I'm a SOIDC down the street. I highly encourage you to talk to your occupational or your orthopedic surgeon about the TSGLI. And sure enough, he goes in and he ends up getting $75,000 for being out of work for 90 days. He was in a wheelchair for over 3 months. And there's multiple ways to qualify for TSGLI. What he qualified for, or what he qualified under, was that he was not able to perform at a minimum 2 activities of daily living by himself for 30 days at a time. So for every 30 days, he was compensated $25,000. One of my closest friends, while on active duty, had a testicle removed because of cancer. And I'm like, hey, did you ever talk to the VA about TSGLI claim? And he's like, I don't even know what that is. So I'm like, talk to your claims representative and discuss it with him. And sure enough, he got $25,000 for that testicle. So, to give you another example, on your hand, if you lose these 4 fingers, that's $25,000. If you lose just the thumb, that's $25,000. This can be a motorcycle accident. This can be, in the line of duty. So this isn't a part of my consultation, but it's just good information. And there are multiple people, provider level and down, that have no idea. There's nobody knows.
I got a question for you.
Certainly.
So I've tried to help with the TSGLI once in the past, failed. It was a little late in the game. It was also a guy had a jumping incident. Now I'm at a point now to where we're having a discussion about a new claim for TSGLI. And when you said they losing 4 fingers or control of 4 fingers, this guy, real simple, had a lot of experience with jumps, wearing a lot of heavy nods and helmets all the time, had his head bent over and badly herniated one of the discs in his neck, doing something fairly benign. It was just teaching, but then he lost grip strength in one of his hands, and a significant amount of grip strength. And we're going back and forth because I don't know what the criteria is to submit a TSGLI, and now he's having to get neurosurgery and aggressive physical therapy. Would that meet that criteria? Because this is not criteria that anybody has told me about until now.
Yep. So on the first, thank you for the question. The first page of the TSGLI is kind of misleading because it's clearly all trauma related. It's like amputations, losing eyes, losing, ears. However, the second or third page of the TSGLI states that if, as a result of, an injury that occurred while on active duty, doesn't have to be in the line of duty necessarily, but if you're on active duty and this injury occurred and it results in you not being able to complete at a minimum 2 activities of daily living, you qualify for this. Due to how the injury occurred, I can't say 100% that it does meet the criteria. However, that is definitely at the physician level to determine that. I think it could be argued that he does rate it, especially if he's not able to, button up his shirts, tie his shoes, brush his teeth. And if that occurred on the dominant side, it's even more significant finding. So I hope that answers that question.
It did. I'm going to have to look into it a little bit more because the first TSGLI we submitted was rejected like 2 or 3 times. So this is a new case and maybe I'll try it again. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely. My pleasure. And I'll tell you, something that will really help substantiate that is if you send them to an occupational therapist, and not a physical therapist, but an occupational therapist, that's going to be able to diagnose like that real significant tactile sensation malfunction. That's going to be the moneymaker. So you can bottom line everything. However, an occupational therapist is going to give that specialized deep dive into the assessment.
Thank you, Rory. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Katie, what else you got?
So I guess one last question that I have for whoever's watching. We have a lot of active duty members who are part of our SAMC community, but we have a lot of veterans as well. So I know that NEXXUS is mainly here to help those transitioning off active duty, but do you have anything to offer veterans or any advice or really anything?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's a great question. This product is not designed to be exclusive by any means. It was really tailored based on what I felt comfortable charging people for. However, I've taken the leap a couple times and I've seen a couple veteran clients. Just saw a veteran who's been out for a couple of years, Stanford business graduate, successful businessman. And I viewed that as a challenge because he's like, I want to talk to you, test your knowledge. His particular situation was this. He had already submitted a claim, and him and I were discussing business related topics, and I was kind of talking to him about what I offer. And he was like, I didn't know any of this when I submitted my claim. And he's like, would you be willing to sit down with me and do a consultation? And I was like, of course I will, with the caveat that this is not my specialty. However, I had a really good grasp on what his circumstances were, which was he submitted a claim a couple of years ago while on active duty. He got a rating, a pretty low rating for a combat Marine, and he wanted to submit another claim. So sat down, talked to him for about 75 minutes, and sent him some really detailed notes. He responded back pretty quickly, and he was like, in 2 years of researching this, talking to multiple VSOs, he's like, nobody has made this as straightforward as you did. All the gray work is taken out. There's a lot of, it's just a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's like you're moving in one direction and then you go to a VSO and they're like, no, man, do this. And it's misleading. So essentially what I'm doing for the veteran clients that I've had is giving them the tools to do it themselves instead of relying on a VSO. The reason I'm apprehensive about using a VSO for those guys is that they may not cover the new Cmp exam. They may not cover how to approach the new Cmp exam. They may not cover how to address the existing injuries that service member doesn't want lowered. And so it's a balancing act. So you go in and you claim something new, but if you're not educated on how to approach those conversations, the VA, while you're not looking, is going to lower your disability rating for the existing injuries you have. And so it's with a great deal of caution that I say, yes, I will talk with veterans. However, it's more of a case-by-case basis. And veterans typically, what I'm trying to avoid is like a case management scenario where I am basically biting off more than I can chew, or my consultants are biting off more than I can chew. So it's out of an abundance of caution. I say yes. I would highly encourage somebody to do a pre-consultation to see if the shoe fits. If it does, I will help them create an aggressive path forward. I did not mention this, but there were 3 goals. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to own my own business. I just am sick of working for people. But there were a couple wickets I always wanted to meet. One was I always wanted to help veterans. And 2, I always wanted to give my friends who are veterans jobs. I'm able to do all of those. So the 3 big wickets and the three guiding principles for my business are to help future veterans, help employ veterans, and help end veteran homelessness. So with all that in mind, a portion of every single consultation fee provides a meal to a homeless veteran through the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. I didn't really speak on this early. I don't like to lead with this, but the long-term goal of Zero NEXXUS is to end veteran homelessness. And, at first glance, that may seem laughable, but when I break it down to what my approach is, I think it becomes a little bit more attainable. Simply put, all the resources and money that exists to treat current veteran homelessness are treating a symptom and not the problem. Veteran homelessness in and of itself isn't this problem that just came out of nowhere. If you track back from the moment that person became homeless and you track their path back, what was their risk level before they transitioned from active duty? What information did they receive about benefits available? This is wild to me, but in order to get a homeless veteran off the street, they have to establish that they're a veteran, right? For the VA to recognize that person as a veteran that's never been registered in the veteran healthcare network, which 76% of veterans are not. So 18 out of 18 million, 76% of veterans are not. So in order for the VA to say, we acknowledge you as a veteran, they have to submit a DD-214, a current driver's license or state ID, and a birth certificate. So my question is, the guy who's not wearing socks on the side of the street is supposed to have those documents? Like, that's just completely unrealistic. So my challenge is, and what I think one of the first cures to this problem is if everybody gets out and they are required to submit a claim, even if they end up with zeros across the board or nothing, they don't need to be rated at 0% in order to get a veteran ID. That veteran ID, 10 years down the road, if they end up in a tricky spot on the street, drug abuse, substance abuse of some sort, they just have to show that, or even better, they just have to give their name and date of birth or social, and the VA is going to be like, yep, you're in our system, come into this program. And so my goal isn't just to eradicate veteran homelessness, it's to we need to shift the whole spectrum. We should be like town, state, and federal legislators. We should be writing curriculum for our kids. We've been on the business end of foreign policy for the last 30 years, and yet we have no say in teaching the history that we've helped to make. And it's something that's just driving me, because it just drives me crazy to see people just kind of settling, they're just like, oh, I'm just gonna live with my mom or do construction for the rest of my life. And it's like, if you served in the military, you've got a couple good qualities. Not everybody in the military is a great person, obviously. But if you were successful in boot camp and you did 4 years honorably, you've probably got attributes that would help you be a community leader in some regard. And that's all I'm trying to advocate for. And it circling back, I really think that begins with getting something as simple as getting a VA claim in. If you're registered as a veteran, even if you're getting 0%, just get your foot in the door with that system so you can be taken care of and not on the street. It's important to note that Housing and Urban Development estimates that on any given night, there's up to 50,000 veterans on the street. We can prevent that. This is a solvable problem. It's you mean we can send somebody to the moon and we can send all these things into space, but we can't create a program that treats veterans? This is just crazy. So I'm only one person, but I'm confident that I have the amount of passion to shift the balance in this. And it's just something that, I reached a threshold where I was like, I have to take action. Even if I fall on my face, even if I get sued and Zero NEXXUS falls completely on its face, I had to take this challenge. I had to take my money out. I had to put some skin in the game to create some solutions. So yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting, and that's really awesome that you're doing that. I've never heard anyone explain how, really tracking back the homelessness problem back to, just something as easy as submitting a VA claim, even if
Yep.
you're claiming pretty much nothing. But I mean, it makes sense that.
And, this is, Zero NEXXUS doesn't just do VA claims. Zero NEXXUS I have multiple phases of this approach. However, I figure submitting the VA claims is a really, really good way to establish trust and build a good reputation. And once I do that, once I establish that trust, helping the veteran community is going to be a lot easier. We'll have some momentum. Ultimately, what I think this needs to turn into is zooming out. There's two neglected parties. One is the transitioning active duty members, and then the other one is the people that haven't joined the military yet. And so I have a couple programs that I'm going to execute for those that are getting ready to join the military. Built into those programs, those accession programs, are going to be metrics that will ultimately assess whether or not you're high risk for ending up homeless. And a couple of those things is going to be pretty simple, where it's were your parents divorced? Substance abuse running your family? What was your, were you above the poverty line or below the poverty line? There's a lot of risk factors that can be analyzed to determine whether this person's high risk or not. And the military is not fit for everybody. So a kid that gets out after 4 years in the Army is like, this sucks. But they don't have anything to go back to. So when they get out, what gets measured gets rewarded. And so based on those analytics, we've determined you're high risk. Don't take this to be like a personal attack, but hey, these are the steps you need to take to protect yourself 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I mean, if Amazon can analyze that you bought this pair of socks and you're going to be interested in this hat, then we can certainly determine who's high risk joining the military. You know, like what socioeconomic background determines somebody to be high risk to end up on the street. We just haven't nobody's invested the money into this, you know? And so I was like, you know what? Nobody can question my motives because I took money out of my retirement to do this. You know, like this affected me. I didn't go ask people for money. I'm doing this on my own accord. And so I'm confident with this little investment, I can start to move this giant stone in the right direction. And there's a lot of support behind it. I just have to create it essentially. And I know that once I do, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are smarter than me that will have much more efficient methods. And I'll be like, you got it, take it. Cause it's not about money. It's about like elevating the community. It really is. When I could talk all day about it, but it's like, when you look at current state representatives, congressmen and women, it's like not a lot of veteran representation, which ultimately translates to how high on the list is veteran legislation. You know, if they haven't been in the trenches, and you know, when it's politically convenient, every politician's like, oh, the veterans, the service members, roger that. But to really affect change at the level it needs to be done, it's really only going to happen, I feel like, if you get some former enlisted guys in there that have become educated, they've weaponized their brains, and they're like, we're gonna make some real change. And that doesn't have to occur at like, you know, the Senate or congressional level. That can occur at like the state level. So yeah, I mean, this is something I'm wildly passionate about, and I could honestly go in any direction with it. You know, between my wife and one of my sisters and I, we put 40 or 50 hours into this every week individually. I'm constantly researching state level benefits because there's a lot of great benefits at the state level that people don't know about. And I mean, even talking about the Veterans Choice Act that was originally signed into law by Obama and then re-signed or extended by Trump. Like, let's say, I like to use this extreme example. Like, let's say junior Marine gets out, came from a crappy home, and gets educated about the GI Bill. And he's like, you know what? He's like, I want to go to school in Hawaii. He can go to school in Hawaii for in-state tuition at Hawaii Pacific University. So, you know, $4,000 to $5,000 a year versus $12,000 to $15,000 a year. The GI Bill is going to cover that. He's going to get, you know, a couple $1,000 a month in BAH. So you can go to live in Hawaii on Oahu, go to school, get a degree while living a cool life, go be a CrossFit coach, or, you know, like go be a dog walker, do something, you know, supplement your income. But you can go from no plan to an amazing plan in the matter of like an hour of discussing this. You know, these men and women just need the tools. They don't know what they don't know. You know, they're like, well, the burden's on me. I'm going to go this alone. And they don't know anything other than grinding it out. So they're like, I'm going to go do some crappy job and get an education over the next 10 years. Doesn't have to be like that.
Right. Wow. Well, thank you for all that. And it's so exciting, everything that you're doing. So
thank you.
Really, thanks for joining us today. Does anyone else have any questions or?
Oh, negative.
Okay, yeah, so thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to say? Since this is going to go on our YouTube channel, so people can watch it at a later date.
I would say that if you're an active duty service member or you have junior sailors, Marines, soldiers, or airmen, that you know are going to be transitioning and you yourself don't have the knowledge to educate them, it's free to call me. If they like, hey, this is a good fit, I want to move forward with a package, they can do that, but at least give them the chance, give them the resource to do that. TRS is not going to cut it, bottom line. I'm essentially doing what I would want TRS to be. So they can give us a call. My Instagram is not incredibly flashy. However, there's a lot of incredibly good data on there. There's form numbers, there's phone numbers, tons of good information. So if somebody just reads through that and they want to go through the CFR on their own and say, hey, this is my injuries, they can do that. However, I can save everybody a lot of time and condense this process down into about an hour. So I am incredibly humbled and incredibly grateful to have been given this opportunity, Katie.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, at SOMC, you know, our main mission is to help soft medics transition from battlefield provider to veteran professional. So that includes literally transitioning from military to civilian life. So this is very important to everyone, but also our soft medics. So thank you so much. All right, well, have a great night and thank you so much for joining us.
You too, Katie. Bye-bye.